Good Shabbos. Today we have the March of the Flags. Their lightning rod for many things in Israel is the March of the Flags today on Jerusalem Day. So what is it about the flags? What's the concept of the flags? Now, actually, it's in this week's Torah portion where God gives the Jewish people and the tribes of the Jewish people flags. Each tribe had his flag, and they marched under their flag. What was this about? So we're told, the Medrash tells us that when Hashem revealed himself to the Jewish people, to give them the Torah, and there was the revelation, he came with 220,000 angels, and each angel had its flag. What does it mean? An angel's not really a body. So how do you differentiate one angel from another? By their flag, meaning by their purpose, by their goal, by their role, by what they are about. And each one has a unique role in this world. And so when the Jewish people saw that, they really desired to have these flags, meaning they wanted to know and to express and experience what was their unique contribution, what they could give. And so Hashem says, you want the flags? I'm going to give you the flags. And in this week's portion, he tells us, okay, number one, I want you to be counted. But when he says, I want you to be counted, he says, b'mispad shemois, that you be counted, but by each person's name being expressed. In other words, saying that even though we're counting numbers of people, each and every one has a name that he's valuable and important. Sometimes when counting, you could lose the uniqueness of each individual. But by mentioning everyone's name, we are saying that no, each person has a name, each person has their uniqueness. And hence, in addition to counting them, he also gave them a flag. Each tribe had a flag. And the flag of Reuven was a color of the stone in the breastplate that said the name Reuven, and so on with all the other tribes. Plus, there was a picture. For Reuven, it was the Dudaim, the mandrakes. For Shimon, it was the city of Shechem, and so on and so forth. So each tribe expressed, their flag expressed what they were about, what their qualities were, and what they were meant to contribute to the Jewish people. So the Mishnah therefore says that a person should say that the world was created for me, meaning that there's a purpose that each one of us has that no one else can do. It's only something we can do. Now, the question always is, how do we know that purpose? Sure, we have Torah mitzvahs that we all have to keep, but how do I know what my unique purpose that no one else can do? How do we get that? So the two responses to that. One is when opportunity meets talent, when we have abilities that are special and unique, that are needed in a particular time and place, especially in our surroundings, where we are. We don't have to go looking for our purpose elsewhere. Normally, our purpose will be there where we're at. So if we have talents and we have an ability in a particular area, and there's a need, then that could very well tell us this is our purpose. I have a colleague who was speaking about the concept like this in a class, and a fellow who used to sit in the class but didn't say much pipes up and he says, I'm a gynecologist, and I was in the hospital today, and I was just about to leave, and then there's a code red, and I run into a room of a pregnant woman who's having a baby, who's in danger. It's a very, very complicated situation, and in danger for her and for the baby. And we and the team worked for 4 hours to save her life. And I shudder to think, if if this happened 20 minutes later, and I would have been gone, the registrar or those without the experience being able to save this woman's life. So I know that was my purpose. And I left the hospital, came straight to the share. And the circumstance, the event says that was my purpose. So that's one way of knowing our purpose, when our abilities meet what is needed in our communities. And another way of knowing what our purpose is when we see what is difficult for us. Famously, the Rebbe explains that when Adam and Eve were given a task not to eat from the tree of knowledge for 3 hours, and they couldn't hold themselves back. The reason for it was because it was so important for them to keep this mitzvah. This was the only mitzvah they had. This was the power of all of humanity's temptations fought against that one particular mitzvah that Adam and Eve had, and therefore they failed. Because you would think, what's so difficult? But the fact is that when something is so important, it could transform the world positively. That's when the negative force is given the ability to oppose it, the great intensity. And we have to realize and know that. The Rebbe writes to someone who says to him that he has a problem with shalom bayis, peace in his home. His marriage isn't the way it should be. It's not peaceful. He doesn't have a peaceful life in his home. And the Rebbe says to him that this is your purpose on earth. And because of that, it's so difficult. And therefore, you have to do what you can to make it good. You see, most people were here before. Most souls were here already. And the things that we rectified, we don't have that great of a challenge to do again, because it's not our main purpose. Sure, yes, there has to be free choice. So there's always going to be a challenge. But that which really is an area that we have to rectify and we have to achieve a transformation, that's where there's the greatest push against. So if you see, this Rebbe writes to this person, that you have an incredible difficulty in the area of shalom bayis, of having a peaceful home, of being there for your wife, for that matter, that means to say that that's indeed your purpose, and you have to double down and do whatever you can to make it the best circumstance for your wife. Similarly, the Rebbe writes to someone who says, I'm cut off from my parents, I want nothing to do with them, I'm not going to say Kaddish for them, nothing. The Rebbe says something very interesting. He says, Adam and Eve were created out of soil. Adam is created dust from the earth, and God blows into his nostrils the breath of life. So the question is, why aren't we all created that way? He was like a vegetable, comes out of the ground. We could all have come out of the ground. Why is it that we come from a parent, some father or mother? In order for us to learn that we have to be respectful of our parents. And the mitzvah of honoring parents can only be possible if the parents actually bring us into the world in the way they do today, rather than from us coming from the soil, from the ground. This also expresses the idea that each thing that comes our way tells us that this might very well be what our purpose is. And this is how I explain, by the way, an issue that quite fascinating. I'd say that many people post the age of being able to have children say that their greatest regret is not having more children. That if they would have, they thought it was challenging financially, educationally. Would I be able to give all my kids the best kind of life if I had another one? And because of that, they choose not to have another child. But later on, they realize we were foolish. We could have made a plan. And I wish I would have had the other child. So the question is, if so many people, after they can no longer have more children, think that they wish they could have had more children, why is it that that clarity only comes later on? The answer is this, that later on, it's not a challenge for you anymore. So you could see things with a clear view. But when you're in the moment, when it's your challenge, when it's possible, that's when the negative forces fight something positive with intensity. And therefore, that's when we sometimes fail. So this tells us that each one of us has to know that we have our own purpose. And one, we know what that is based on our abilities and our circumstances. Two, when we see an area of our life that's really difficult, that might very well be the area that we must put our focus in. Conclude with a beautiful story of the conductor Toscanini. So Toscanini had a biographer, and he was interviewing him for a book. And he says, I'd like to come to you on this and this night to be there to To interview you further, he says, that night you can't come because I am listening to a concert over the radio. So he says, it would be an honor for me to just be there and watch you listen to the concert. She says, okay, but you cannot ask anything. Okay. So he comes and he watches Toscanini listen to the concert, and it doesn't bother him. He just watches the whole time. And at the end, after the concert, so how was it? He says it was pretty good, but there was something missing. There should have been 15 violinists, and there were only 14. There was a concert of 120 musicians, and 15 of them were meant to be violinists, and there was only 14. How do you know that? So I know. So the journalist finds out, asks the questions, and finds indeed there were 120 musicians. There were meant to be 15 violinists, and there were only 14. He goes to Toscanini. He says, "How do you know?" He says, "How do I know? I wrote the arrangement, and I wrote the arrangement that it would need 15 violins. And I heard that one was missing. One was sick, and they didn't come, and that violin was missing. It was necessary, and it wasn't there." God is the conductor of the entire world. And he knows each one of us has our music to give, has our uniqueness, our flag that we can and should give humanity into the world and to fulfill Hashem's purpose. So if one of us is missing, it's something lacking in the orchestra. Each one of us is given our particular purpose. And that's why maybe we make a blessing every morning to God for making us as we are. Concept that he made us as we are. That's the only way we can fulfill our purpose, by being who we are, by being the gender we are, by being the religion we are, by being by using our talents and our abilities. We should never be looking at someone else and think, "Oh, I wish I had this," or "I wish I was them." Because if you were them, you wouldn't be fulfilling your purpose, and then the music would not be played as beautiful as it should. We have to each give to the symphony of life the special notes that only each one of us is able to give. Shabbos.